Hello there, welcome to another UnlockYourSound.com tutorial with myself, Chris Carvalho. In this tutorial today, I'm going to show you some basic level management and why I use pre-fader metering when I am mixing projects in Logic Pro. Now, what I've got here is just some Apple loops that I threw together. A couple of them are software instruments and another couple of them are audio, and I've done that on purpose. Now, if we actually just look at the levels as I play this back. Now, quick housekeeping. What I'm going to do here on the master VCA fader here is I'm just going to negate this by 10. Now, this is just housekeeping for this tutorial because at this point the mix is really hot. So I'm negating 10 decibels here for the sake of your listening experience. So it's not too loud going through your speakers or going through your headphones. But again, what I'm teaching you in this tutorial has nothing to do with this. I'm only adjusting this at places in the tutorial for the sake of your listening. Okay, cool. So let's have a listen to this now. Okay, great. I obviously haven't mixed this. There are no fader movements and all of the levels are as they are coming out of the audio files or coming out of the synthesizers as I drag them out of the Apple Loops browser. Now, what we've got here, what our meters are showing us are the level of the tracks after fader adjustment. Now, obviously, we haven't made any fader adjustments, so it's the same as what's going in. But if I had made a fader adjustments, for example, if I brought all of these down to minus infinity now, I obviously don't see anything on my meters because the meters show me the level after fader. However, if I turn on pre-fader metering, which is this icon up here on my transport bar, if you don't see that, you need to right click on a grey space there, customize control bar and make sure pre-fader metering is on. You click OK and then you click on the button to make it visible. And as you see on the mixer, as I toggle that, the meter flips over to the other side of the fader, which is a visual representation of the signal flow. So we've got pre-fader metering on now and the meters come before the faders because the meters are going to show you the level before the fader. So now, even with all of my faders down and I press play, I still see the levels, which is very good to know. Okay, which means that I can now go on to adjust these levels because if I adjusted the levels after fader adjustment, what the fader did would be kind of lying to me. If the signals are going too hot into my plugins and going too hot into the fader, I wouldn't necessarily know because I'd already brought the fader down and, you know, hadn't really solved the problem at source. So what I'm going to do now is get all of these levels down to a nominal level, okay, which is for me peaking around minus 12 dB, basically the very top of the green part of the meter. So let's start with this track here. So this is a software instrument track. Now the best way for me to get that level down, it only needs to come down by, looks like a few dBs. The best way for me to do that is to go as early in the signal flow as possible, which is the synth itself. So I'm actually going to open this synth and I'm going to turn down the volume. And to get it down to minus 12, I'm going to need to take off about 4 decibels. So I'm just going to drag that left to 4 decibels there. Obviously every synth looks different. Most synths have a graphical interface as opposed to this one as it's being shown in Logic right now, so you just have to find wherever the volume knob is on the synth that you're using. I'm going to reset the peak reading there, minus 11. Okay, so I'm going to do 1 more dB. One more. There we go, minus 5. Alright, great. Cool. And I'm going to move on to the next track, which is also a software instrument. So I open up the synth that the sound is coming from, and I look at this. Okay, cool. That's about minus 4 right now. So I need, 8 less, which is around here, to bring that down to my minus 12 nominal level. Now I'm going to move on to the next one. Now the next one's different because it's audio. I don't have a synth to open to manage that level. So what I do is I select the track, to highlight all of the regions on that track, and I look at the level again, which is +2 right now. And I come over to the region inspector, which you might not see, but you have to click on that enclosure triangle to see it. And then I use clip gain, which is this guy here. Okay, so on clip gain, I know to go down -14 because the level was already at +2. So I'm going to bring that down. And there we are. That's down there. And I'm going to do the same with the next audio track. That is giving me a reading of around -2.2. So I'm going to do double click on that, which I can do as well, as opposed to dragging it when it wants me to. Oh, there we go. -10. Great. All of my levels are nice and green right now. Okay, so that's my level management done. Pre-fader metering just allowed me to see the levels before the levels, you know, before what the fader did to them. Okay, which meant my ears could take a rest as well. I could drag all the faders down and just manage all of my levels and get them nominal. Great. Now the next thing I do when I actually start mixing is, you know, I normally start with the drums, or if it's isolated, I use the kick drum as to start. But in this, I have a track with all of the drums summed into them, so I'm just going to start with that. What I'm doing now is I'm dragging this fader upwards until what goes out to the mix bus is around -12. Right, but obviously I need to turn this off here for the sake of your listening, back up to 0. And I'm just going to bring that back down a bit because I probably already exceeded that. Again, I'm only adjusting that for the sake of your listening experience. It's not actually part of the process. And again, I'm just raising this until it's hovering around a -12 on the mix bus. Great. And then I'm going to mix everything else in by ear. And then we'll see what level I get on the mix bus after that. So I'm just going to press play, move on to the bass. Okay, there's some slight clashing between the kick drum and the bass there, which I'd remedy with EQ, but I'm not going into that in this tutorial. Next. Great, so I've done some very basic mixing, very basic fader work right there, and you know, I'm relatively happy with this as a rough mix for the sake of this tutorial. What's cool is that I have, I've got 8 decibels of headroom left. So if I did any mix bus processing before I sent it to mastering, you know, it could be some EQ movements, for example, and then it could lead into some compression movements. I know a lot of people say don't do processing on the master on the mix bus before you send it off to mastering, but it's your mix. You can do what you want. I would just avoid limiting, really, just so that you know you're not submitting an audio file with a smaller dynamic range than necessary. But compression, gentle compression, and EQ movements, and anything else that you want to do for taste, do it. Don't let anyone tell you not to do it. Cool. I normally put compression on the mix bus, very, very, very light, just for the sake of gluing it all together, just for the sake of taming the dynamics slightly before it gets into further dynamic processing in the mastering process, like limiting and stuff like that, for loudness. This just means that I'm taming those peaks slightly before they get, you know, shoved into the limiting, into the ceiling of a limiter. So, you know, I'm watching this needle and making sure it's no more than like 2 decibels of reduction even there. See, I've got the attack open a bit there, and I've got the release open a bit there, and my ratio is low. It's like 1.5 to 1. That just helps glue it all together, really. But, you know, you can do, you know, feel free, it's your mix, to do mix bus processing as I have. Great, so now imagine yourself, you are about to bounce this down and send it off to a mastering engineer. We've still got about around minus 9.2 decibels of headroom. All you would need to do to, you know, push the mix up towards the ceiling now so that you can use as much of the 24-bit dynamic range as possible before you send it off to the mastering engineer, is you can just use a simple gain and make the appropriate adjustment in gain up there until, you know, it's not clipping. Obviously, you know, the only thing you really need to avoid before sending it off to a mastering engineer is clipping. The headroom doesn't really matter because they can make gain movements themselves, but you need to avoid clipping. But it'd be good to use as much of the dynamic range as possible by gaining this up towards the ceiling, but never ever hitting the ceiling, never ever clipping. And then you'll just bounce it down as a 24-bit and send it to a mastering engineer. Or you would, you know, if you're going to master it yourself, but in a separate session, you would bring that into another session and master it there. So anyway, guys, I hope that's been useful. That was pre-fader metering and basic level management. As you saw there, I always had headroom. If you've ever seen the blog mixed by Mark Mozart, he had a really cool example of this. He was like, headroom is like money in the bank. You know, just save it until you need it at the very, very last minute. That was my awful sort of rendition of it anyway, my takeaway from that, but you get the idea. I hope that's helped, guys. Please let me know if you've got any questions or concerns about that at all. I'll happily answer them, and I look forward to hearing your feedback. Cheers.